Good morning, everybody, and I'm reminded of the mayor of Bogota, who observed that the measure of a developed city is not when poor people drive cars, but when the rich use public transport. And not that I class myself as the rich, I certainly class myself as the fortunate. But this morning, I made the mistake of getting in a taxi and meeting every single bit of congestion that the City of London could throw up this morning. So for that, I'm taught a lesson, reminded that I should just get back on the 214 bus and the tube. But thank you very much indeed for giving me this opportunity to talk to you this morning. And I hope that one day I will be a mayoral candidate, but at the moment I'm one of 6 Labour contenders. We all want to be the Labour candidate. We'll know that in September, but this is a job I really, really want to do. And it's a job, I think, which makes sense of my experience in government, of delivery in government. And I think that the challenges that London face, and you know, most of us here, I suspect, are Londoners who love this city, but know that it could be better, and I think are well aware of the risks that face London as a rapidly growing city. So I'd like to begin by talking about the risks facing London, and then I'd like to talk briefly about were I to become your mayor, what I would do to address those risks. And I'd like to just start with your point about London's relationship with the rest of the UK. I do not believe that London should try to develop itself as a city-state. I do believe that there are substantial further powers that the Mayor of London needs in order to respond effectively to what I consider to be the crisis facing London. And I'm very happy to talk about those. They certainly include more fiscal devolution, London keeping more of the money that it raises, but we also need more mayoral powers in order to address properly the challenges that London faces. So the first is London as part of the United Kingdom. London drives in part the economic growth of the United Kingdom, but London reinforced with more delegated powers and therefore greater capacity in its executive leadership. And I talk about building one London, and I'll say a little bit more about that, but I see the, if you like, the kind of instruments for delivery as being a strongly forged relationship between the mayor, the GLA, and the boroughs. A mayor should intervene when the boroughs default, but presume that the boroughs take the key role in the delivery of the necessary changes that, that London needs. So the first point is London as part of the UK. The second is, you know, I've been in politics for a very large part of my life, and I no longer believe that the old polarities of left and right mean very much anymore. I think what does mean much more is whether your politics are inclined to be open or closed. My politics are open. They reflect, I think, the character of London as an open city. What does that mean? It means a city which advocates for and is strongly dependent on our membership of the European Union. I believe that withdrawal from the EU would be catastrophic for London. Access to this trading bloc, but then all the other cultural benefits of that. I think that we should be more self-confident in recognizing the benefits that migration has brought to London and our reliance in our highly diverse economy on the skills of migrants who choose to come and live here. London is an optimistic city at its best, and there are few more powerful statements of confidence or votes of confidence in our city than that people from around the world not just want to come and invest here, and we should be open to that, but people from around the world want to come and live here. And in doing that, they are welcome to make a contribution to the growth and the shaping of the city that we are. And next week, we will mark two utterly interconnected events: the bombing of London on the 7th of July and winning the Olympic bid on the 6th of July. And both in their own way changed London forever. And the interconnection of the two, I think, reshaped the character of our city. There are, however, risks facing London, and I'd like just very quickly to focus on what I see as the principal risks. I mean, I will have much more over the next few weeks to say about congestion, its consequence for pollution, the illegal levels of pollution in parts of our city, which are quite frankly unsustainable, the need to renew our infrastructure. And I hope that given that I was out of the blocks on the Olympics before there were many other advocates for the Olympics, I am pretty brave about casting a big vision and then taking the decisions that can actually realize that vision. And I think that London really does need the executive capacity to take the big decisions that London needs. And so I believe in what we need to do by way of renewal of our infrastructure, and I would hope very much to have a role in leading London down that path. Let me just say a few words about the greatest crisis which faces London, and that is the shortage of decent, affordable housing, homes for Londoners. Remember, policymakers and bureaucrats talk about housing, people talk about homes, and there are too few people in London who want to be Londoners, who want to live and work in our city, that go home at night to a place that they feel is home, where they're going to put down roots, where it's worth unpacking their bag, and located in a community that they want to give to. And that, in turn, poses a great risk. And I think that it sort of doesn't matter what your particular interest is in looking at the risks facing London. Every risk register will now record a shortage of affordable homes as one of the key risks facing our city. So what would I do about that? First of all, what is the shortage? Well, if you look at the trends over the last 8 years, you'll see steady decline in the number of people who are owning their homes in London. You will see the same and even steeper decline in the number of homes being built for social rent by local councils. That's basically because the money has dried up. And you will see a very sharp and almost an exponential increase in the proportion of Londoners who are renting in the private sector. But a lot of those Londoners are spending between 60 and 70% of their take-home pay on rent. That is not sustainable. And in too many cases, they are paying rent for property which is just horrible. And at the very far end, I went out recently with the enforcement team in Newham, one of the few boroughs that managed to get in under the bar before a restriction was placed on the registration of private sector landlords, and have a comprehensive licensing scheme. The problem, if you do it in isolation, is that bad landlords are simply move to other boroughs, which is why, just to give you a taste of one of the powers that I would want the Mayor of London to have, is the power to require registration, or for the boroughs to require registration of private landlords. The good landlords have nothing to fear, but the landlords whose properties I visited on that day, I hope have a lot to fear. Overcharging, unsafe, gas boilers, leaking roofs, properties that smell, unlawful developments out at the back, beds in sheds, and so on and so forth. So that has to change. And these properties house part of London's workforce, but it's a pretty invisible and marginal population, but we should be ashamed that in our city there is property of that standard. So the first is to improve the quality of private rented accommodation and to increase the volume of the private rented sector at affordable rent. Because the second element of the homes crisis which faces London is the difficulty of recruitment of nursery assistants, of nurses, of people to work in GP practices, people to work servicing the responsibilities of local government. London is just too expensive, and as people move further and further out to where they can get cheaper, more affordable accommodation, they then spend more and more on their travel costs coming into work and more of everyday commuting. So that's why we have to increase the proportion of privately rented accommodation at affordable rent. The third element is rent to buy. Because again, I don't think it is right and sustainable that most young people have just given up on the prospect of ever owning their own home. And we have to do something about that, and rent to buy, I think, has a lot to offer, where you pay rent in lieu of a deposit, and what it does, the rental payment is then in time replaced by a mortgage, and what that addresses is the fact that in some boroughs you will work for anything between 20 and 30 years, saving at the normal rate in order to be able to afford a property. So that is the scale of the crisis. And every year, London is building 25,000 homes fewer than the need determines. So we're building up a cumulative deficit. So what would I do? If I became the Mayor of London, I would set up on day one an agency, a task force. Actually, I think it's a world-class team in City Hall, Homes for Londoners, that would act. The best analogy, and some of you here will be familiar with this, the best analogy is with the Olympic Delivery Authority that did such a brilliant job in constructing the Olympic Park on budget, on time, actually a bit below budget, and on time. And what the Olympic Delivery Authority did was to act as the intelligent client, protecting or representing the public interest. So other benefits flowed from that. like, for instance, an unprecedented and productive partnership with the trade unions, which meant that the construction of the Olympic Park set new records for health and safety. So what the Homes for Londoners agency would do is to bring together a world-class technical team in order to drive progress, to support the boroughs, because remember this, you know, the boroughs, their planning capacity is depleted, their technical development capacity is in so many areas depleted, and this would be a way of compensating for that. So where would we do it? There is no shortage of land. Too many excuses about problems of land. There is a shortage of technical expertise, and there's too much complacency about the many reasons why it can't be done. And I'd point you to what I think was one of the great early achievements of the ODA, which is East Village in the Olympic Park. Nearly 3,000 flats, nearly 3,000 homes. It is a mixed development, social housing managed by Triathlon, private rented housing, and housing which is homes which are being sold in the open market. And last year, transport connection, schools, health centre, so the essential infrastructure. And last year, it was voted by one of the planning awards as the best place to live. So there is land to do this. There is capacity to create the speed, pace, and urgency, recognizing skill shortage and so forth. What we need is will, purpose, and focus.
Thank you very much indeed, Dame Tessa Jowell.